Let's get into the exciting news from over the weekend. That was Tennessee scoring 103 points at Rupp Arena against Kentucky. Rob, it was the first of many times under John Calipari, and in terms of his team allowing that many points. Sakai Ziegler, Josiah Jordan James had career games. It was a total team effort, as you wrote about over on the sites a couple days ago. What a win for Tennessee! A huge win over a rival on the road, and now Tennessee picks up win number 6 in Southeastern Conference play.
Yeah, it's enormous. I mean, this is not a great Kentucky team, certainly by their standards, but that doesn't diminish, what Tennessee did and, winning in Rupp again, the fourth time in the last 7 years. Santi and Josiah, as Grant, as mentioned, picked up their third win of their careers. I mean, it's special. I mean, just the way that this rivalry has flipped. What is it? Rick's got 11 wins in this series. Tennessee had that many in 30 plus years, before 2015. And there was nothing fluky, about that game at all. Tennessee was the better team. I mean, Kentucky, hung around. I mean, they're good. They're very talented, but Tennessee to me was clearly the better team, and that was a big time game. I mean, whoever lost that one was looking at a 2-game losing streak. Really hurt your chances of winning the SEC. Tennessee still has some work to do. Thinking that the loss at South Carolina, but the bounce back from that home loss to go up there and win, in a pressure cooker on national TV, I just thought it was a real statement from Tennessee.
And Grant, if not for Dillingham and his heroics and his 6 made 3-pointers, 35-point game for Kentucky, I mean, it could have been a whole lot worse. Tennessee could have won that one by 20 plus.
Yeah, he took 20 shots from the field. He made 14 of them. I mean, that was the kind of heater that he was on for the entire game. And I mean, I agree with Rob. Kentucky's not great, but they're elite offensively. They can put up points. I mean, they can erase a 14-point deficit in no time, and then they can give up a 14-0 run in no time because they're that bad defensively. I mean, it did look like kind of like routes on air in terms of just how open Tennessee was getting, how easy Tennessee could make it look on the offensive end at times. And honestly, I didn't really expect Tennessee to win that game going in because I knew they were going to have to score 90-plus points to beat Kentucky, and it's tough to do that on the road. It's tough to hit enough shots, especially when you're coming off a 59-point game at home against South Carolina a few days before that, and it felt like it was going to be a tough thing to respond from. But the way they came out, the 8-0 start to the game, the 13-3, and then Cal's got to take a timeout, and I think Rob said it in the final minute there. Rupp Arena is emptying. You just don't see that a lot, especially with Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee hasn't won up there a ton, like Rob was talking about. I think they were 4-35 in Rupp Arena before Rick got to Tennessee, and now they're 4-5 in their last 9 at Rupp during the Barnes era. So that just kind of puts the historical perspective on how rare it is to win there. But not only that, to score 100 plus as an SEC team in that building for the first time in 30 plus years. And now people are talking about, well, people that cover Kentucky are talking about Cal better do something in March, or maybe this thing's gone south or run its course, or maybe there needs to be changes made. I mean, that's where that kind of loss kind of sent Kentucky, and they've lost 3 out of 4, and they're in a tough spot. But Tennessee would have been in a tough spot too if they'd lost that and dropped back-to-back games against South Carolina and Kentucky last week. So for them to go on the road, score it the way they did, and not rely on Dalton Connect scoring 30 or 40 or whatever, the balance of production they had, that was why, in my eyes, it was a huge, huge response.
Yeah, and I don't mean to hijack it. AP, everybody weigh in. I'm not, trying to pile on Kentucky or anything like that. But I mentioned this in the 3-2-1 that was on Monday. Man, if you just had to pick which program is healthier right now and in a better spot, I think it's Tennessee. I mean, Grant, you referenced the fans and the media saying Cal's got to do something in March, and that that place was, as soon as they had a reason the other night, that place was empty, which you don't see often. I think the one and done stuff without a lot of success from all the one and done stuff in March, and Cal's kind of, the things like skipping the coaches show when you make $10 million a year. Kentucky is an elite blue blood program, fantastic history and tradition. I'm just talking about right now, today. Tennessee feels like a healthier program to me.
Well, it is, and I think part of that is it's years and years and years of the one and done culture, because it is hard to kind of flip it around. Now, I do think when you can technically, like, Connect's going to be a one and done, right? Because he's out of eligibility, but he's an older guy, and what do those freshmen do? They hit walls. They're emotional. they kind of ride the wave. Sometimes, I mean, when things are great, boom. When things are bad, they go in the tank. I mean, one of the greatest stats I heard was on Matt Jones doing his deal afterwards. Only 8 times in the history of Kentucky basketball have they lost back-to-back games at home. 3 of the 8 are since COVID. So, like, he's talking about the decline of the program. And, you know, they dropped 2 now in a row after they lost, you know, the other night to Florida and then, of course, to Tennessee. So, like, that's to me very, very telling about kind of where this thing is headed at Kentucky, to your point, Rob, that is not going in the normal Kentucky type direction.
I mean, they haven't been out of the first weekend in, I can't tell you how long, 15, 16, something like that. And listening to Cal postgame talk about a young team making mistakes.
To the media, not on his radio show, to the media.
Yeah, I wanted to, like, bang my head against the wall. Like, you built this thing over and over. This is what you've done for however many years on end now, where you're going to win the offseason, have the best – people are going to talk about the best recruiting class in the history of college basketball year after year with Kentucky, because it's a bunch of 5-stars, one-and-dones, and Cal's going to be all over the green room on draft night. He's going to be, you know, when all these guys are getting drafted and all this stuff. But it's hard to beat veteran teams, older teams, fifth-year guys like Santi and Josiah and a Dalton who's 22, 23, whatever he is. Like, it's hard to win college basketball games with a bunch of 18-year-olds, a bunch of one-and-done kids. They might be elitely talented and some of the best 5-star prospects to ever come out of the, you know, high school ranks, but it's just hard to win consistently. And they could go on a run to the Final Four. Miami had the same exact blueprint last year where they were elite offensively. They were ranked around 100 defensively, and the matchups worked, and everything went down the line in March, and they made a run to the Final Four. And Kentucky could do that, and Cal would be back, and he'd be the king again, and Kentucky would be back on top and all that stuff. Or they could have another first-round, second-round exit, and they could be talking about, man, is this it for this guy?
So you had Dalton Knecht, who was averaging, 31, 32 points over his last 6 games, whatever it was. And he came out and he scored 16 points, 5 of 14 shooting. You had Zakai Ziegler and Josiah Jordan-James, who were really bad offensively against South Carolina. Josiah Jordan-James has struggled on the offensive end for weeks now. They put up career-high 26 points. Zakai Ziegler, a double-double, 13 assists. Josiah Jordan-James made 4 3-pointers. And Grant, as you were mentioning, you know, since the game, I mean, he was, 1 of 18 from 3 in SEC play entering the game. I mean, what a moment for – and again, it's something we talked about back in November, that, like, it doesn't have to be Knecht every single night. It doesn't have to be the same guy every single night. But it's so good to see on the road in SEC play against a rival where some of these veterans that have been big for you at points and times on the offensive end, that have been a little quieter, at least in Josiah's case, step up to the moments and not back down, and you're the reason you won this basketball game. I mean, just what a game there by both Zakai Ziegler and Josiah Jordan-James. Phenomenal performance when Dalton Knecht, I mean, he wasn't nothing. He had 16 points, but he certainly wasn't, you know, what he was the last, 5-6 games.
Yeah, he looked like he was forcing it a little bit. He had a corner 3 there early on that didn't go down, and he was kind of on some of the drives. It looked like he was trying to draw contact and not really worrying about finishing at the rim, and it just looked like sometimes he tries to do a little bit too much, which it's hard to blame him for doing that because we've seen how productive he can be. But for Zakai to go 0 for 6 against South Carolina and score 2 points in like 33 minutes and one of the worst games we've seen from him during his Tennessee career, and to come out and I think he started 5 for 5 from the field at Kentucky, 4 for 4 at the 3-point line, something like that. And yeah, I think since the last time he made more than 1 3 in a game, he was 2 for 23 from the 3-point line, and that went back to like late December. To non-conference play. So for him to come out and hit shots, not only did he score it the way he did, but time after time he was hitting a big shot. He had the big response. Rob, me and you talked about that after the game. Like, when they needed a big shot, they went to Joe, and Joe found a way to hit it. And that's huge for them because they got to have that.
I was going to say, Rob, I thought the best thing going is Josiah. I mean, how much have we seen in the last month and a half where he's had open looks, whether it be from 3 or even inside the 3-point line, and he has just been gun shy to shoot from a confidence standpoint. And even the other night, there was one point late in the game, Tennessee was up, I think, 11 or whatever still, and he probably could have got the shot off, but he decided to pump fake, and he took a step to the right, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he went gun shy for all of a sudden. Then he fired it and made it, and that's something he wasn't even doing last Tuesday, much less, the last several weeks. So, I mean, don't you think that this game kind of puts the confidence back as it should?
Oh, you would have to think so. Just, as well as he played, but he's been up and down before, and I don't want to. I'm not being critical of Josiah, but I mean, I just there was no way to predict that. I mean, Grant was throwing out some stats. I had I looked up a bunch of stuff for the 3-2-1. AP, to your point about the confidence. He had a really rough stretch to start SEC play. He was 1-8 at Mississippi State. He was 2-9 at Georgia. And after that little stretch, that's 3-17 in 2 games. I mean, he just quit looking at the basket. The next 4 games, he took a total of 11 shots, and he takes 18 at Kentucky. And in the 6 games before Saturday, he had 13 total points, and he doubles that in 1 game. I mean, it just came out of nowhere. I mean, I couldn't have been less surprised as Sakai played well. I mean, I didn't think he was going to subject Kentucky to that level of violence, but would not surprised he played well. But man, I mean, Josiah stud that, not that he had a good game, but that he dropped 26 points and took 18 shots and hit 4 threes. That was just a tour de force.
Yeah, not only that, he became in the win. He had 5 rebounds, given the 12th Tennessee player ever to reach 750 career rebounds. Just an all around good game for him. Tennessee takes down Kentucky. Tennessee will return back to Thompson-Boling Arena. Food City Center will take on LSU on Wednesday. We'll hit the road for College Station against Texas A&M on Saturday. Grant, what's this team need to do? What's kind of the storylines for this week heading into LSU and Texas A&M?
Consistency. Don't have a 59-point Tuesday and 103-point Saturday. I mean, the schedule lines up right here where you better take care of business.
They better stack up some W's, haven't they, G?
Yeah, you better go 6-0, whatever it is. You got LSU, Texas A&M, Arkansas, the like, Vanderbilt again. And then you look at those final 4 games of the schedule. You host Auburn, you go to Alabama, you go to South Carolina, and you host Kentucky. And that's the 4-game run into the postseason. So you better win some basketball games between here and there, and then you better have a pretty good 4-game stretch because you don't want to get beat up in that last 2 weeks of the regular season and go into the postseason doing some soul searching or whatever and trying to figure out what kind of team you are. I didn't think that South Carolina return trip was going to be so tough, but they're a little bit better than I expected. I mean, they're fortunate to get Auburn at home because it's really, really tough to win at Auburn. It's going to be tough to win at Alabama, and then senior day against Kentucky. You're going to have to win that game because it's senior day against Kentucky, and you just went to Rupp and did what you did. But the way the schedule sets up, you better play some consistent basketball, like Rob said, and stack up some wins.
Meant to make mention of this earlier, Rob, but Cameron Carr got a little bit of run in that basketball game, 3 minutes. What was the reason for that, and what did Rick Barnes think that he brought to the table, and why he wanted to use him in that situation?
He pretty apparently has passed Freddie Dillon, and I and Grant seen it too. I mean, Cam's had a couple. He's been getting some run with the quote unquote orange team in practice, but to me, that had happened before last Friday when we saw it, and Cam still hadn't played. But Saturday was a pretty strong statement that he's the next guy up on the perimeter, and he's past Freddie. And he didn't play great, but man, he certainly he had a big time assist to Josiah on the alley oop, and I guess he didn't hurt himself when he played 3 minutes, I guess. So I would you come in and don't what down your leg in that situation as a freshman. The only time you've been in any kind of situation like that close, and hold up, do what you're supposed to do. I mean, I would say more opportunities are probably coming for him.
And I'm sure Rick will be asked about this the next time he talks, but I just happen to be looking at the Tennessee bench right before Cam goes in, and Justin Gainey gets up and walks over and says something to Rick in Rick's ear, and Rick shakes his head, and they go get Cam. So I don't know what it was that Justin Gainey saw in that moment, why they needed Cam, if it's foul trouble, if it was trying to defend the 3-point line better, something like that. But to Cam's credit, that first defensive possession he was in on the game, they kind of went right at him. He stood his ground. He played good defense, and then he came up with that loose ball and had the presence of the mind to throw the lob to Joe and to make that play. So that was, I mean, it felt like we hadn't seen Cam Carr since non-conference, basically. So for him to come in on that stage, in that moment, in that arena, was pretty impressive.
And despite the win where you score 103 points at Rupp Arena, according to ESPN's Joe Lunardi, Grant, the Tennessee, it's deserving to be a number 1 seed right now in his projections, but it's not going to be because those Houston and Carolina aren't moving.
No, and it's one of those things where there's probably 5 number 1 seeds, and there's got to be somebody left out, and that's not the worst thing in the world to be the top number 2 seed, especially ahead at this time of year. North Carolina and obviously Houston lost on Saturday, and people are wondering why they're sticking there. And North Carolina lost at Georgia Tech. Well, Tennessee lost at home against South Carolina on Tuesday. That's what it is this time of year. There's a lot of losses, and the metrics love Houston. They're number 1 in the net. They've got 6 quad 1 wins, and then you look at North Carolina. They're pretty good, and they beat Tennessee head to head in late November. So it's one of those things where, do you really want a number 1 seed, or you find being at the top of the number 2 seed line? I think that's a good thing.
North Carolina goes from the championship game to nothing last year, back to being right in the mix for a chance to go again. I mean, you talk about riding the wave. I mean, geez.
North Carolina, the basketball gods are rewarding for North Carolina for saying we're too good to play in NIT. We're literally taking our ball and going home. To now, they're going to be right back to being the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament.